Our journey around Athens continues with viewing both the Roman and Greek agoras. While it's about 500 years newer built, we'll see the Roman one first, because I stumbled across it first when I was in Athens. This was specifically built for Julius Caesar. I named this artistic shot Half-Baked, after the Ben & Jerry's ice cream. While the pot is huge, it is still standing, like I also do when I am half-baked. One thing I appreciate about this area is that the site hasn't been entirely excavated. Walking here is peaceful. The entrance is challenging to find. If you travel to Athens, I highly recommend grabbing a snack before entering here and finding a nice stone to sit on. It's a nice stop away from the Greyhound tours. Notably in this area, we can see remnants of a fountain. In the Roman era, water was currency and a sign of wealth. Structures here stand high and proud. One thing I want to point out is the use of poppy flowers that decorate not only the floor, but also many of the marble carvings. And here we see the public latrine. While in Roman and Greek times, they did separate washrooms by male and female, there was no stigma in bodily function and thus no separation of people in stalls. The drainage system you can see here carried the water and body waste out of the agora and city. Long before Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook to build a social network, the Greeks solved that problem 25 centuries ago by building agoras. Agoras were large meeting places with the majority of functions one had to do in a social environment all in a single place. In fact, the word agoraphobia comes from the original Greek, scared of being in a public place. This said, the Greek agora was one of my favorite spots in Athens. It also may have been awesome because I came here long before the tourists and had the entire place to myself for about 2 hours. On top of many pillars you see here stood a stoa, or statue, of modern-day influencers and gods. This area has been excavated for the last 92 years and work is still in progress. It's overwhelming to imagine how immaculate these buildings must have stood thousands of years ago. Amongst the vast ruins we see here in this area also included a court of law, a library, a mint to create coins for currency, a temple, and, of course, a raised platform so a speaker could project their ideas to the people around. On top of the hill in front of us, we see the temple of Hephaestus. Hephaestus was the god of metalworking, craftsmanship, and fire. History tells us that some of the best marble and craft workers were from the 5th century BC. So this god was a pretty big deal back when the agora was built. On top of the temple, like the Parthenon, we can see sculptures that held stories and lore of the past. Unlike the Parthenon though, all of this old shit from this temple is here, not in the British Museum. While we are unable to view inside the temple, it's breathtaking to imagine how epic this must have been 25 centuries ago, when the sun was much younger and the atmosphere was 2,500 years cleaner. To breathe that crisp morning air and just to have a minute with the god that was in charge of all of this dope talent. And now we are embarking on Marble Walker's Way. This is where the marble workers lived. This little roof thingy in front of us shows some stuff under excavation. Apparently, this is a Roman house. I'm not sure how they determined that, but I believe in science, so let's just go with it. To the left of this little house, you can see how much is still buried under the agora. The sloped hill shows walls just peeking out of the ground. I wonder what's underneath. And here we see the prison. If you were a baddie back in the day, this is where you were caged in, which would suck since you wouldn't be able to see any of the beautiful things around you. So, life lesson from the Greeks, don't be a dick. And opposite the temple of Hephaestus, we see both ruins and a reconstruction of an old market. which is now a museum. Here you can see stoas lining the area. Some are standing and others are kept in restoration and in environment-protected cages in the actual museum. This marker contains epigraphs of Greeks who fell in the Persian War, which took place from 499 to 449 BC. And now we are magically on the second level of this building. In here line shops with things like dyes, textiles, and other useful things. It's to note that during this time, women were the ones who ran these shops, and, of course, who moderated the religious ceremonies. Men were mainly builders, rubble workers, and, depending on the class, part of the Senate or government. The Pinks was a meeting place that grew in size over a couple hundred years. Originally, it was built for 6,000 people in the 5th century BC. Over the next 200 years, it grew, holding over 20,000 people. This is the area where people used to gather and discuss ideas. Greek law stated that any man had equal right to project their idea. Persons of age 50 or older, though, held priority in speaking. After the amphitheater of Dionysus was finished, which we saw last week, the Pinks was no longer used, since the new build held a room for more people to gather. Here we can see where the speaker used to stand and use the acoustics of the hillside to amplify their voice. And these caves are allegedly where Socrates was held in prison. His demise was that he didn't acknowledge the gods of the city, and that he wanted to introduce some new ones. This was forbidden at the time, and the only solution to this was for Socrates to drink poison to de-life himself. Leading up to that, he had to stare at Acropolis Hill. What a brutal punishment. More recently, though, in World War II, these caves were used to protect relics from the Parthenon and Acropolis Hill from Nazi invasions. After being secured in here, the entrance was covered with cement.